Hello and namaste. The almost daily Zencast, home of your favorite podcast subject, the Good Morning Trumptopia special segment, presents today's Nugget of Zen. I am your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zappo. Welcome, friends and listeners. It is 2:11 p.m. on Monday, April 27th. Thank you for tuning in. This is today's Nugget of Zen. It's a quote from a meme that already seems to have kind of gone through a popular phase, but might very well be coming back in a strong way soon because it's so relevant at the moment. But think about this. In truth, when it comes down to it, to the matter of it, I'm butchering this. Let me start over. When it comes down to it, the only knowledge that really matters is how to purify water, how to grow your own food, how to cook, how to build, and how to love. And funnily enough, we are not taught any of that in school. It's almost like they want your head filled with useless crap that you will never really benefit from, so that you are always dependent on the government and on corporations. To some people, that sounds perfectly fine, perfectly reasonable, perfectly normal. The very definition of postmodernism, convenience, being independent of a relationship to the land and our food and how it's cultivated. It's some extension of modern progressivism and technological evolution, right? It's the natural extension or conclusion or result of, more accurately, of the Industrial Revolution. But when you set aside convenience, when you set aside the norms, when you set aside everything that we get trained into, right? Everything we get taught about how to navigate and, quote, survive, end quote, in this postmodern concrete jungle that we've created and enslaved ourselves to, the things they don't teach us stick out like a sore thumb, because the moment something goes wrong, we will all be at each other's throats instead of just thriving without the system. And curiously, that kind of chaos is easily profited on. And what is it that the system does? What is it that those in control are most addicted to? Profiteering. So it is no surprise, really, when you think about it, that very few people know how to purify water. Very few of us out there actually, practically and pragmatically are capable, through the knowledge and the wherewithal of having the stuff to grow our own food. Very few people out there really know how to cook. We know how to warm things up. We know how to use the oven or the microwave or the stovetop to defrost things. And I mean, there are of course exceptions to all of this. But how many of us really know how to build? If we had to build an aqueduct next week, how many of us are really ready to lead that, to execute it, to design it and engineer it? I mean, setting aside all the people trained in these specific things, right? I'm talking about the everyday, average Joe Schmo on the street. And then truly, most profoundly, last on the list but not to be neglected, how many of us really, truly, deeply understand, outerstand, and innerstand how to love. And I mean that very seriously. There are multiple modalities of comprehension that we all lump together in this word, understand. How many of us truly, deeply, manifestly comprehend how to love unconditionally, how to love without requiring a transactional fee from the person receiving our love? How to love in that way that does not require others to conform to our expectations, to jump through our hoops, explicit or hidden. How many of us know how to love the way Buddha loved, the way Gandhi loved, the way Yeshua loved, the way anybody who truly did shine like a golden one? They loved in a way that's metaphysical, multidimensional, extra-dimensional. They loved in a way that most people today are more prepared to mock, ridicule, spit in the face of, piss on the face of those speaking of such love. Most people today will call you names, will put you down, and mock you openly for speaking of love as anything other than a romantic notion between romantic partners. To what end? What good is this postmodern, toxic as fuck, concrete jungle of an open-air death slavery prison? What good is it really doing? I mean, I get it. There's a lot of benefits to the postmodern era. We have plumbing, we have medicine and hospitals. I get it. I'm not blind to that. And I'm not saying burn all that to the ground. But I'm saying underlying all of it, there is a certain level of toxicity that we have been neglecting beyond our entire lifetime. We've been neglecting it throughout, since the Industrial Revolution, right? Since the time before the Industrial Revolution. Arguably, in my thesis, we have been neglecting this issue, this toxicity issue of the way in which we are building our own future since we knocked over the Tower of Babel. Which is, of course, both a real physical, pragmatical thing that happened out there in the material world, but also an esoteric event that happened in the interdimensional worlds. Which is, of course, a deep subject to get into on another episode. I invite you to contemplate this conundrum, that we are dependent on these things, even as we criticize them, these governments and these corporations. Even those of us who are, quote, woke enough to call them out, still drive cars, still shop at the stores. I mean, I know that there's a spectrum of this, right? And that there are truly people really off the grid already out there on their own land, growing their own food. Of course there are. But most of us are on this side of the spectrum, no matter how adamant we are in our vocal critiques and our public activism, right? And that's myself included. I'm sitting here using multiple toxic devices that are reliant on oppressive business practices that damage other human beings in order to be able to tell you, hey, contemplate this, friends. We've built a toxic system. We've built a toxic system that is not only oppressive and destructive of Mother Earth and of our fellow brothers and sisters in the human species, but of ourselves. Those of us who enjoy this system and turn a blind eye to the toxicity are, in fact, enslaved to the convenience. And we are being traumatized, no matter how much we are abiding by it because of the convenience that is provided. We are being spiritually, emotionally, energetically, and yes, indeed, physically traumatized. But there is hope yet, friends. For we can indeed teach ourselves and teach each other how to purify water. We can rediscover as communities how to grow our own food locally. We can indeed reinvent how we prepare that food, let alone cook it. And we can always rally around new ways to design and build communities. And love, thank God, is an organic truth that resides in everyone, no matter how fucked, how jaded, how bitter, how cold, how removed from their own understanding of themselves they have become. Deep down, love is everywhere, because it is not the cartoon, sexualized, over-sexualized, hyper-minimized little nugget of something that we have distracted ourselves with, but rather a fundamental, energetic, structurally significant, and organic to the whole cosmos phenomenon. It is something larger than we give it credit for being. And we can always reconnect to it, rediscover it, reintegrate it into our lives. No matter how dark things get, no matter how complex our social circumstances seem to be, no matter how indomitable the evil empire appears to become, no matter how impossible to change the enemies pretend to be. These things are always within our grasp to change and reconnect to and rediscover and reinvent. And that, my friends, especially this ingredient of love, is something we should be turning our focus to before it is too late. As always, thank you, friends, for tuning in. I have been your incorrigible host, Mr. Zeppo. And this has been today's Nugget of Zen. Music on today's episode is New Disco 101 Remix, Palm City Nights, by DJ Zed and collaborators, from the fictional album The Early Years, Volume 3. As always, friends, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. And don't forget to pay that shit forward. The world needs it.